Hi, everyone. Welcome to How to Be a Dungeon Master. I am here with a wonderful guest, Laura Gray, who is a full-time illustrator, a D&D enthusiast, and a games writer for Screen Rant. And managing to do all of those things while also being a new parent, which is shocking. But welcome, Laura.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. It's going to be really exciting to go over some of these topics that I'm personally really enthusiastic about.
I am so excited, and I did read many articles that you have written about Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm like, oh, that would be a good topic, and this would be a good topic. But what you're here to talk about is a recent article that was published by Screen Rant. I get like... I see like hundreds of articles on D&D pop up every day, it seems like. And I read a lot of them, but the headline on your article really struck me. It was how to encourage D&D party bonding in downtime. I'm scrolling back through the article. During downtime.
During downtime, yeah. So for me personally, this topic actually goes back to my hesitation to begin playing D&D a few years ago. I feel like one of the things that I had always been really worried about was that when I heard people talk about Dungeons and Dragons, it was always the combat, you know? You spend hours and hours in combat cycles, you fight these amazing bosses, you go through these dungeons. But I'm a creative writer and comic illustrator, and I've always had a deep love of narrative. So when I first got introduced into the storyline, my first D&D campaign, I homebrewed the whole thing and blew it up. It was awesome. But I learned a lot of really important things right out the get-go that I don't think I would have learned had I been doing a pre-built campaign. And that is the weight and value of roleplay, especially as a new player, when you're still trying to pick up all of the rules, when you might be overwhelmed or intimidated by the vast world you're exploring. And as I've gone on to continue to play as a player and run as a DM, something that's always kind of come back up with new players is I'm really nervous because I don't know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. How do I get comfortable? I'm nervous to join a party with other experienced players. And I found that encouraging bonding with your party and role play between your characters helps to strengthen that courage in your new players while encouraging cohesiveness and immersion in your long-term player party.
It's amazing. So we've talked a little bit about downtime in this segment because I do think it's something that gets overlooked a lot. I think like dungeon masters might feel the pressure to just be like encounter after encounter after encounter. Mm-hmm. And a lot of players really gravitate towards like the action and like, you know, they want to have that combat, but there is so much to be said for those downtime activities. And one of the things I love about playing D&D is the bonding I experience with the people I'm playing with. Like a lot of what happens in the game kind of, you know, bleeds out into your real life, and you do feel a really strong connection to the people that you're experiencing this imaginary game with. But I never really think about like the PCs interacting with PCs. We spend so much time talking to NPCs, you know, throughout the Dungeon Master peppers them into the story, and we're meant to, you know, to get information or go on a quest that's, you know, they are giving us. But I'm trying to think back into the games that I've played, and I don't remember spending a lot of time talking to my party.
Yeah, and that's a really common situation. And I personally think that it really impacts your engagement with your party. I have found that encouraging party bonding enables players to care about the characters beyond their own and puts more weight in the survival of your party as a whole, more interest in other character backstories. And as a DM, I found it invaluable because this information that you gain as characters interact with each other allows you to throw in specifically flavored moments that bolster certain characters. I think in that piece, I talked a lot about like, you have the opportunity to set up specific situations that cater to a character's strengths. So say you have like a rogue who has spent their entire life outdoors, has learned most of their trade from maybe a family member, a mentor, somebody they really care about, and they're traveling with a city-bound cleric who's never spent a night out in the woods. And they have this opportunity to engage in a way where the cleric can express their anxieties about being in the woods for the first time. And the rogue can be like, well, here's this skill that I learned when I was a kid. And you get this really interesting flavor, as well as encouraging this relationship between these two characters that would otherwise not really interact a whole lot. One of the things that I've noticed too is when you have fighters versus heavy magic users, there can occasionally be like a party divide where a character will spend a lot of time preparing spells, or they'll spend time shopping for their own components while, say, you have a fighter who's busy at the blacksmiths. And like, obviously, a lot of the time in fast-paced campaigns, this stuff will be considered do it on your own. Make sure you're prepared before the session.
Yeah.
But I feel like it takes away from the opportunity to kind of like have a moment. And these moments don't have to be very long. When I'm running my campaigns, I try to keep the character interaction somewhere between the 3 and 4 minute range per character interaction, which can kind of add up. But I've found that the sacrifice of an encounter, like a random raider encounter, actually the balance works out really nicely, because these players have the ability to build their interpersonal skills and come up with really entertaining plot twists for the DM. You have two characters that have been spending a lot of time together. They learn each other's play styles, and then suddenly they're working together in combat in a way they wouldn't before. You know, the cleric is suddenly invested in this rogue and may go out of their way to ensure a healing spell, or the rogue may see an opportunity to investigate a situation that would include the cleric, instead of these two classes that may not interact a whole lot actually getting this opportunity to build that relationship.
That makes a lot of sense. But do you have to give any guidance to the players when, like, are you like are they going to be like, why are we alone in the store together?
So yes. And the skill of this is learned. So you have some people who will come in natural thespians. Mm-hmm. They're usually playing bards or wizards. And they are very open and excitable and ready to engage with any opportunity you give them. But then you may have like somebody who's playing a barbarian who's a little bit more like trying to play that stoic character. So trying to encourage that downtime, what I usually do with new players or in situations where I want that engagement, is I put a common puzzle in the space. So like in the instance of the camping scenario with the rogue and the cleric, they need a fire. So I'm like, okay, well, who wants to build the fire? And I try to get two characters to kind of volunteer for certain specifics. The other thing, you can set up, I hate to use the tavern because I think I've written a few pieces now about the tavern being the place to engage. But say you have two characters sitting at a table over dinner and you give them the opportunity to, like, say the bartender walks by and accidentally knocks over the tankard on one of the characters. And like, is anybody in the party going to come up and like engage with them, help them clean up the mess, see if there's a place for them to get straightened up? And this sounds like such tedious stuff, but in the moment it goes by so quickly. And then these characters have that opportunity to engage in conversation. In characters who've been playing in campaigns that I run, and they're used to this play style, I've actually found that after about 4 or 5 sessions, they'll notice when I'm giving them the opportunity to engage, and they will take it usually.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, the party is headed to a new town. They've just finished an encounter. They have 40 minutes of walk time to the next location. And I'll say something like, all right, so you guys are about 40 minutes out. Does anybody have anything that they're looking at? And I'll give them a chance to kind of engage in their surroundings, engage in each other. Or I'll point out that the weather's particularly chilly or rainy. And like, these give them kind of prompts for their character to react. This also goes back to the piece I wrote about encouraging character role play.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people are fond of immersion and playing as their character in their character with a character voice. And this opportunity actually originated from that, encouraging players to use their character voice instead of saying, well, my character walked over here and my character walked over there. Saying, Bell noticed that it was particularly wet and cold. He draws his cloak more around him, but the fabric is very thin. And my character encouragement has helped bring the role players out of the role players. Like people who start out really, really shy, by the end of a first arc are usually pretty bold and engaging with their surroundings and the other players that they are in the party with.
Yeah, that was one of the things that stood out in the article, was that how these interactions have a lot of benefits, obviously, but one of them is for new players and how it boosts their confidence. Because when I have played with brand new people, they get really nervous about role playing. Yeah. Like that is one thing that they're like, I don't think I can do a voice, and I'm scared I'm going to say the wrong thing, and I don't know, like especially when they're playing with experienced people. So yeah, like I love the idea of giving them this confidence, but in a way, when I read that, I was like, that almost seems counter to like what I know about new players. But you're saying like this actually is a good exercise for them.
Yeah, and it can be really intimidating. Something that I do when I have new players starting is we do the introduction episode. So there is no heavy plot in that, like episode 0 for us. Usually it's like you're all making a decision to go into a space and do something together. A good example is right now I'm running a epic run haunted house.
Oh, fun.
And the characters have all responded to this flyer, and they arrive outside of the haunted house because it promises them the ability to have an experience they have never had in all their travels. And at level 20, you know, these guys have seen a few things.
Mm-hmm.
So they show up and they have the opportunity to like go through this haunted house and get to the end. And if they get there, there's this really awesome prize. But all of the characters are out. It's a party made up of people who would never come together unless they were all trying to engage with something as silly as this.
Okay.
So they all meet up outside of the haunted house and they talk about like, why are they there? What is the reason that they are trying to get into this house? Why should they party up? And, so like, I offer that space to kind of get into your character's head. With new players, I always give encouragement. When we have a new person coming in, I sit down with my party ahead of time and I'm like, remember not to steamroll. I talk about party etiquette quite a lot in my pieces. Listen with both your ears, not half your ears. Remember that your party is bolstered by every player and not just yourself. And that it is important to give everybody a platform to speak. And so this party etiquette allows people to kind of think before they act, because when you're really excited in a D&D campaign, your first thought is, I'm going to do that now.
Right.
And by encouraging that pause, these newer players are able to kind of find their voice. And finding your character voice does take several sessions, sometimes more than several sessions for some people. But if you have a supportive party and a supportive group of players, they're going to help you find that voice. So encouragement of the party to engage with this new character and not to correct the player if they don't immediately use their character voice. Right. Give them that space to kind of find themselves. And I found in the downtime session, when they're not worried about what spell to use, what sword to pull, what combat is happening, is a great time to encourage that confidence.
So as I'm hearing you talk, and I think the etiquette is also a great important topic, but you know how, have you ever seen, there's like dinner party prompts that for like, you know, in real life, like if you're, I don't know why you're having a dinner party with people you don't feel that comfortable around, but whatever, that there's like little like conversation starter things that you leave at like their place setting or something, and it's like, ask the person to your left, blah blah blah,
if they've ever pet a cat.
Yeah, like what's your favorite animal, like things like that. I'm almost wondering if like doing, like, I love tables. I love random, like just rolling dice and be like, this is my new background. Cool. Okay. I love that. But I wonder if there's almost an element of doing something like to help those newer players. If they're like, I don't know why I'm at this haunted house. I really have no idea. Yes. And I'm scared, like giving them, like letting them maybe put together a quick table, or letting them draw out of a hat or something, like, this is why you're here, you know.
This is why you have shown up at this location.
Yes, if that. Do you think that would help?
I think that could be really helpful. Creating like a D100.
Yeah.
And it's like the gnome paladin is here because they want to see how many small spaces they can fit into with this new weapon, like completely random.
Yeah.
That encourages some out of the box thinking.
Yes.
I think that especially if you have a new player who is vocalizing anxiety about playing with seasoned players, sitting down with them ahead of time and kind of going through that backstory can be helpful. But if they want to play seat of their pants, creating a table would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. I don't know if that's just my own love
I
of
want to
tables.
try that now. Well, it's really funny. I've been integrating tables into a lot of stuff recently just because it's really interesting to see what happens when you've got a random element like that.
Yeah.
So it would be really cool to put together a situation where you have everybody enter a shop and everybody rolls a random dice to see what they're looking at in the shop.
Yes.
And then what are they going to do with that item? Do they buy it?
Yeah.
Do they have to buy it right off the bat? Like, you got mouse foot. What are you going to do with that mouse foot?
Why did you want
And
this?
the wizard turns it into an earring and everybody's kind of grossed out for a little bit.
But hey,
it creates an interesting element, especially if somebody is really worried, they're focusing so hard on speaking in an accent that they're not necessarily picking up on the social cues of their party.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You don't want them to be so focused on that faux immersion that they miss the actual immersion because there's
yes.
So yes. All right. I like this. I'm asking this a lot because I know later this month my husband and I are going to be playing D&D with 3 new people.
Who goodness, that's a big new party.
There's I have my husband will DM and me and another guy are experienced, and then there's the 3 newbies, and they're all very eager to as adults, which I love. They're I've always wanted to play. Nobody's ever asked me, or I didn't know how. We're here for you. Great. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to think a lot of times with that downtime or in combat, I feel they kind of get it. They're excited to roll dice. They're excited to see what's going to happen. But it's those moments in between that I know are going to happen that I want to I'm picking your brain to see how I can, get them to bond.
Yeah.
And I think when you tell people well, you can literally do anything, then that's when
so overwhelmed.
They're so having maybe a prompt is just enough to get their wheels turning. Maybe.
Well, something that I like to do too is I like to have my players roll an investigation check on their party members.
Oh. So
this allows them to see things that I, as the DM, may only know, or the player themselves who's running the character only knows, that this fabric is made out of linen that's not from anywhere you've ever been, or you notice that this character has a scar on their cheek that you didn't notice before while you were traveling.
Oh, and it allows that.
Yeah, it allows the character to engage and ask questions. And that is a very quick way to engage 2 characters in dialogue with each other.
Oh, that's really cool. So that's also there's enough of a prompt. Ask about the scar, and then
it gives them just a little nudge.
Yeah, that I think is just usually what they need to get there.
Yeah.
And now that
the
other character gets to have a time to share a little bit more of their backstory, perhaps.
Yes, and kind of add that flavor that allows people to relate to their character. The other thing that I like to do is when they're in a space, I like to ask somebody how their character is behaving in a crowded location. If you've got a drow who's never been in super populated areas outside of the Underdark, and they're suddenly in a tavern filled with boisterous bards and people talking and things clanking, how do they feel about that? Are they, pulling the collar of their shirt up? Are they pulling the lip of their hat down? Maybe they're lingering by the door trying to get out, and a party member notices, wow, you look super uncomfortable. Do you want to step outside?
Oh.
And then they can go into I have really bad social anxiety because I've not ever been around this kind of a group of people before. And it gives that chance to connect on a human level.
Yeah. And that's where the empathy comes in real life, which is why, it's good for kids to be. Those are great things to also employ when you're playing with kids, to give them the opportunity to recognize somebody is in trouble and here's how I can help that person.
And then they have that opportunity to really connect. And I think that I don't know about you, but when I first started playing, there was a lot of everybody is secular. They're doing their own thing. They're in their own head. They're not connecting. And then when we started implementing some of these engagement tactics, the cohesion went up. But something else that I noticed was that in character, battle tactical skills went up. They began engaging in a way where they were working together during combat, instead of just like, Final Fantasy VII waiting for their turn to hit, suddenly they were like, oh, wizard, use your earth molding spell and make a pothole. Or, oh my goodness, you have Misty Step, get behind that person. And they started engaging in this group tactical kind of game plan. When we were playing Curse of Strahd, my wife was actually running the campaign. And so much of Barovia is pay attention to your surroundings, use what you've got. You don't have a lot. So we got to a point where in every single encounter, the team was working together to utilize our barbarian strength, our bards boosts, our wizards. I was playing what we like to call a garbage wizard at the time. He would use whatever he had and some evocation magic and hope something came out that was useful. And then we had a drow. Oh goodness, I am totally spacing her class right now. That is terrible. Oh, warlock. Thank you, dear. My wife was listening. But yeah, so we were all working together using these skills that we each had to bolster, recover, and survive. And it created, especially in the Curse of Strahd, a very unique narrative in which the characters all became very attached to each other. And so much so to the point that when things start going wrong and like stuff starts to get quite dark, it was emotionally traumatizing to think we could lose one of our characters in this party. Because we were all like, oh my gosh, they all have to get out of here, but there's a really good chance you're not, it's a very heavy campaign. There's a very good chance of full total party kill near the end.
Yeah.
So like, it added a whole new level of like weight. The stakes were so much higher and it was awesome. Like as a player, it was just, every session was just, you were on the edge of your seat with everybody there with you. And the best part was we have a player who's always playing remote. And so even when we're all, sitting on screens, it felt like we were all in the room with each other because our characters were all there together.
Oh, that's really great.
And it was built through that party bonding experience.
That's amazing. And it is a whole different game when that connection between players and between characters does exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how, like when you're planning your campaigns, are there moments when you're like this, I'm going to drop in some downtime, or does it always happen naturally, like before you're resting or after a rest, or are you planning these moments?
So it's kind of a mixture of both. I try to give at least 3 opportunities for character dialogue in every session, whether that's just briefly before the party goes into a new room, while they're like in the haunted house one. I've been encouraging a lot of dialogue between characters as they solve the puzzles that are in the haunted house, because it's all ingenuity at this point. They haven't done an encounter yet, so they're solving these puzzles, and I give them a little bit of space to kind of feel out their character and add their character flavor on. But I also do, I try to pause when the players are showing interest in each other. It's not always ideal from a DM standpoint when you're eager to push your characters into the next section of the campaign. You're eager to get to that boss fight. And as a DM, you have to remember to like slow down and listen to your players' cues. We have a cleric that just was pulling some really ingenuitive moves in our last session. And it would have been so easy to be like, no, we're not going to do that. Please just like let other people do the roles, because this isn't, or like I could have just completely stopped the character dialogue that was happening between the paladin and the cleric as they were trying to work together. But instead I took a step back and naturally let them do it. It added 15 minutes to our gameplay, but it gave us so much flavor.
Yeah.
And that was definitely not planned. I thought that they would just like buzz right through these easier puzzles in the first room and then we'd just move on. But instead they were really taking the time to build those relationships with each other.
Oh.
But this is a party that has played together for a while and knows these play styles that I tend to pull out.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always pan out that way. If with new players, it can take a little bit longer. And that's when I put a little bit more of that encouragement in so that they get used to this play style where you have creative freedom.
Right. So
Dungeons and Dragons is a creative playground. And if you don't have that space, you can't paint your pictures.
Right. Yeah. Well, gosh, I had another question, but I feel like that's such a beautiful ending.
Sorry.
I love that. No, really. You're absolutely right. That is why I think this topic really stood out to me, even just from the headline alone. I love the idea of the bonding between the characters because, like I said, one of my favorite things about D&D is the social connections you make in real life, and to have that. We don't often think about it happening in game, but just talking to you and hearing how important it's important. It's important to your game. It's important to your characters. It's important to your dungeon master, and it's a great way to get more story hooks out there to further your plot.
Well, and engaging people in the narrative allows such a beautiful story to unfold. It doesn't matter what pre-built campaign you play. If you give players that creative freedom, every adventure you have will be entirely unique, like a little thumbprint.
Oh, that's another great ending. No, this is why you're a fantastic writer.
Thanks.
So I did read a lot of, of your other Screen Rant articles. And I know there's a lot of other really good topics in there. So would love to have you come back as a guest.
I would be delighted to come back and speak to you about these things. It's an area that I really am very passionate about and I'm excited to share with other people.
Well, you're great at sharing. So thank you. So in case people haven't read this amazing article we keep referencing and want to read more of your work, where's the best place for people to find out more about you, about your writing, about your illustrating?
So you can find anything that I write on Screen Rant. So if you just type in Laura Gray, Screen Rant, my tag will pop up. I cover D&D, I cover Pokemon. I do quite a lot of Animal Crossing if you're at all interested in finding out what cool things Animal Crossing should add. Most of my updates come near the weekend. So if you're looking for new content, it usually comes right around a Saturday. You can also find me at my Twitter handle. I believe it's just my screen name. Let me look real quick. Yep, Laura Gray Holt. And I post articles that I'm particularly interested in myself there. So things that I want to share and have been taking the time to build up over, because, don't want to flood my Twitter screen. My illustration handle is actually Apollo's Celtic Swan. You can find that at Instagram. I do almost exclusively D&D art right now.
Ooh,
so
nice.
I have lots of character portraits and stuff. It's pretty cartoony, not for everybody, but I sure enjoy it. And then you can find some of my published work in the children's section of various local bookstores here in Idaho.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I work with a lot of nonprofits to help bolster women's services and spread the awareness for diversity inclusion.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. My art is almost entirely geared towards diversity awareness.
Fantastic. Gosh, another reason to love you and your work.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, very cool. Everyone definitely check out Laura's work. There is a lot of great advice there, and we're definitely gonna have to have you back. I am excited to talk to you more.
I would absolutely love to come back, and you guys just let me know when, and I will be here.
Sounds good. And I know as a new parent, I totally appreciate you taking the time. And although it's probably kind of a nice break from,
I always miss him, but my wife is being very sweet and hanging out with him right now. So,
well, we'll let you get back to him.
I'm going to go give him a squeeze.
All right. Give him a squeeze from us too.
Okay, I will. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you.